My name is Callie Wilson, a 32-year-old graphic designer from Boston, with exactly $3.42 to my name. With a life-changing job interview just hours away, my gas tank was empty, and my pride was about to take a fatal blow. I never thought asking my successful banker sister for a $100 loan would lead to public humiliation. But what happened next shocked everyone. The moment I typed $5.3 billion into that transfer form, the entire bank went into lockdown. Before I continue my story, let me know where you're watching from, and hit subscribe if you've ever been underestimated by family members. Trust me, what happened next will make your jaw drop. Growing up in Brookline, a middle-class suburb just outside Boston, my childhood looked ordinary from the outside. Our modest two-story colonial home with the slightly crooked mailbox sat in a neighborhood where everyone knew each other. My parents worked hard to provide for us. Dad was a high school math teacher, and Mom worked as an administrative assistant at a law firm. We were comfortable, but luxuries were always carefully considered. From the beginning, my sister Amanda and I were different as night and day. 5 years, my senior Amanda showed exceptional mathematical abilities early on. By 3rd grade, she was solving algebra problems. My parents would beam with pride as they watched her fill notebook after notebook with complex equations. Meanwhile, I was the kid, with paint permanently embedded under my fingernails, sketchbooks filled with drawings, and a tendency to daydream during practical conversations. When report cards came home, Amanda's straight A's in advanced placement classes would earn prime placement on the refrigerator door. My mostly B's, with an occasional A in art, were acknowledged with a simple pat on the shoulder and a distracted, "Good job, Callie." It wasn't that my parents didn't love me. They just didn't know what to make of a daughter whose mind worked in colors and shapes rather than formulas. The real divide began when Amanda was accepted into Phillips Academy, a prestigious private high school. My parents stretched every financial resource to afford the tuition, convinced that this opportunity would secure Amanda's future. They weren't wrong. Meanwhile, I attended the local public high school, where the art program had been reduced to a single elective due to budget cuts. I spent weekends working at the local ice cream shop to pay for my own art supplies. Family dinners became showcases for Amanda's achievements. Amanda scored in the 99th percentile on her SATs. Dad would announce serving her an extra scoop of mashed potatoes. Amanda got accepted into 3 honor societies Mom would share with neighbors who stopped by. When I won a regional art competition and my painting was displayed at the Boston Youth Arts Exhibition, my father nodded and said, "That's nice, honey. Art is a wonderful hobby." The golden child narrative continued through college. Amanda attended Wharton Business School on a partial scholarship with my parents, taking out a second mortgage to cover the rest. Their investment paid off when she graduated with honors, immediately landing a position at Atlantic National Bank. For my education, I cobbled together a partial scholarship to Massachusetts College of Art and Design, worked 30 hours a week at a coffee shop, and took out student loans I'm still paying off today. After graduation, Amanda's trajectory continued upward. She moved from entry-level analyst to associate to manager with dizzying speed. By 35, she was vice president of investment services at Atlantic National, with an office overlooking the Boston Harbor and a salary that allowed her to purchase a penthouse in one of the city's most exclusive buildings. My post-college years started promisingly enough. I built a decent freelance graphic design business, specializing in branding for tech startups. For a while, I was making good money enough to rent a 1-bedroom apartment in Somerville and occasionally treat myself to dinner at restaurants where you didn't have to order at a counter. But the gap between our lifestyles grew wider, each year becoming impossible to ignore. Holiday gatherings became exercises in discomfort. Amanda would arrive in her latest luxury vehicle, dressed in designer clothes, bearing expensive gifts purchased by her personal shopper. I'd take the subway wearing my nicest outfit from 3 seasons ago, carrying homemade gifts or items found at local artisan markets. The contrast wasn't lost on anyone, especially Amanda. "You know, Callie," she said, during one Thanksgiving dinner, swirling a glass of $100 wine she'd brought, because our parents' selection wasn't up to her standards, if you'd focused more on practical skills instead. Of drawing pictures, you might not be struggling so much. My father nodded in agreement while my mother busied herself rearranging the centerpiece. Neither came to my defense. Any mention of financial challenges in my life, even casual references, triggered Amanda's unsolicited advice. You should really consider a more stable career path. Or, have you thought about getting a real job with benefits? Her tone always carried the same patronizing undertone, as if my chosen profession was a childish phase. I stubbornly refused to outgrow. When our parents approached retirement age, it was Amanda who helped them set up their accounts. Amanda, who supplemented their retirement fund with generous gifts. Amanda, who found them a financial advisor from her extensive network. These actions, while generous, established her position as the family provider, the responsible daughter, the successful one. It created an obligation that hung over every family interaction. I tried to maintain my dignity, despite the growing disparity. I focused on clients who appreciated my work, found joy in my creative process, and reminded myself that success could be measured in ways beyond bank balances. But each time Amanda casually mentioned her investment portfolio, or her recent vacation to Bali, or the interior decorator she'd hired, I felt smaller. The last Thanksgiving before everything changed, Amanda outdid herself. She arrived with a trunk full of presents wrapped in custom paper featuring family photos. For Dad, a limited edition golf club signed by his favorite pro. For Mom, a diamond tennis bracelet from Tiffany. For me, an expensive leather portfolio with a card that read, "For your little drawings. Maybe this will help you look more professional at client meetings." My gift to her sat nearby a hand-illustrated book documenting our childhood memories, each page carefully crafted over dozens of hours. When she opened it, she flipped through quickly, said, "How cute," and set it aside to show everyone the new watch her boyfriend had given her. That was the moment something hardened inside me, a small seed of resentment that would later bloom into something I never expected. The economic collapse hit the creative industry like a tsunami. Within a single month, 3 of my biggest clients called to cancel all ongoing projects. Budget cuts, they all said apologetically. We're focusing on essentials only. Apparently, branding and design had become luxury items overnight. My emergency fund might have carried me through under normal circumstances, but fate had other plans. 2 months earlier, I'd woken up with excruciating abdominal pain and ended up in the emergency room with a ruptured appendix. Even with my bare-bones insurance policy, the out-of-pocket expenses demolished the modest savings I'd managed to accumulate. The medical bills arrived weekly, each envelope thicker than the last numbers growing, despite my partial payments. The first overdue rent notice appeared under my door 37 days after losing my clients. The pink slip was followed a week later by a more sternly worded reminder. My landlord, previously friendly during our hallway encounters, began avoiding eye contact. The utilities joined the chorus of financial distress, with emails and letters warning of imminent service disconnection if payment wasn't received. I attacked the job market with desperate determination. Over 2 weeks, I submitted 47 applications for positions ranging from senior graphic designer to administrative assistant at design firms to retail jobs at art supply stores. My daily routine became a ritual of refreshing my email inbox, checking my phone for missed calls, and visiting job sites to see if any new opportunities had appeared overnight. The silence was deafening. Occasionally, an automated response would acknowledge receipt of my application, promising review by the hiring team. Twice, I received polite rejections which somehow felt worse than no response at all. At least they confirmed someone had seen my application, considered my qualifications, and explicitly decided I wasn't worth interviewing. As my bank account dwindled, I began selling personal belongings. My collection of art books accumulated over years from gallery exhibitions and museum visits went first. Then my second monitor and graphics tablet. Then smaller items, clothes, barely worn kitchen appliances, used only occasionally a vintage camera from my photography phase. Each sale brought temporary relief, enough money for groceries or to make a minimal payment on a utility bill, postponing disconnection for another week. The email from Hudson Media arrived like unexpected sunshine after months of storm. "We were impressed by your portfolio and would like to invite you for an in-person interview for our art director position." The listed salary range started at $85,000 a year, more than enough to dig myself out of financial ruin. The interview was scheduled for tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. For the first time in months, I felt a flutter of hope. This wasn't just another job, this was the job. The one that creative professionals in Boston competed fiercely to land. Hudson Media handled advertising for major national brands. Having their name on my resume would open doors even if this position didn't work out. I spent hours researching the company, preparing answers to potential interview questions, and selecting my most impressive projects to showcase. The morning before the interview, reality crashed back with brutal force. I grabbed my car keys ready to drive to a coffee shop to review my portfolio, one last time when a warning light on my dashboard reminded me I'd been running on fumes for days. I checked my bank account on my phone, $3.42. Not enough for even a quarter tank of gas. The humiliation came in waves. First at the grocery store the previous evening, when my card was declined for a $7 purchase consisting of ramen noodles and a bag of apples. The cashier's pitying look as I fumbled through excuses about switching accounts stayed with me all night. Next came the pawn shop, where I reluctantly handed over my grandmother's silver bracelet, the only piece of jewelry I owned that wasn't costume. The pawnbroker offered $50 less than a tenth of its actual value. I took it without argument. Still short for what I needed, I called 3 friends. The first didn't answer. The second apologized profusely, explaining that she'd just lost her own job. The third promised to help next week after payday. None could offer immediate assistance. For hours, I sat at my kitchen table staring at Amanda's business card. The embossed letters caught the light: Atlantic National Bank. Amanda Wilson, Vice President Investment Services. She wouldn't miss $100. It was less than she spent on lunch most days. But the thought of asking made my stomach clench with dread. Our last conversation replayed in my mind. Still drawing pictures for a living, she'd asked at our mother's birthday dinner last month. You know, there's always room for someone with your creative background in our marketing department. Entry level, of course. The clock ticked past midnight as I debated my options. Take 3 buses to the interview, risking being late. Try to find a rideshare driver willing to accept payment later. Walk the 8 miles in interview clothes and heels. Each alternative seemed worse than the last. Finally, exhaustion won over pride. I would visit Amanda at the bank first thing tomorrow morning. $100 would fill my tank, maybe leave enough for a quick breakfast before the interview. I'd repay her as soon as I received my first paycheck from Hudson Media. I set my alarm for 6 a.m., determined to reach the bank when it opened at 8:30, giving me plenty of time to make my 10 o'clock interview. As I drifted into uneasy sleep, I couldn't have imagined how that simple decision would change everything. Atlantic National Bank's headquarters dominated the Boston skyline, 60 floors of gleaming blue glass and steel architecture that seemed to touch the clouds. I'd seen it countless times from a distance, but had never entered. Now standing across the street, the building looked less like a financial institution and more like a fortress designed to keep people like me outside. Security was tighter than I expected. The front entrance featured 2 guards in tailored uniforms, checking identification and issuing visitor badges. The expansive lobby bustled with people in expensive suits carrying leather portfolios and sleek briefcases. I adjusted my blouse, suddenly conscious of the small coffee stain near the collar that hadn't completely come out in washing. My one interview outfit already felt inadequate for the day ahead, but in this environment, it might as well have been pajamas. "Can I help you?" asked a guard, his expression professionally neutral, but his eyes performing a quick assessment of my worn shoes and the bag I'd attempted to mend with fabric glue. "I'm here to see Amanda Wilson," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm her sister." Something flickered in his expression, recognition perhaps, but his tone remained formal. "You'll need to check in at reception and receive a visitor pass. Please have your ID ready." The lobby featured cold marble floors that amplified every footstep. The walls displayed portraits of stern-faced men, identified as bank founders and past presidents, dating back to the institution's founding in 1897. The message was clear: this place had permanence, tradition, power. I had none of these things. The receptionist at the executive floor desk wore a headset and managed a computer screen I couldn't see. Her navy blue blazer looked freshly pressed, her makeup flawless. "I'm here to see Amanda Wilson." I repeated my earlier statement. "I'm her sister Callie." The receptionist's polite but distant expression shifted subtly. "Callie Wilson." She typed something into her computer. "I see. Miss Wilson is currently preparing for a meeting with investors. Did you have an appointment?" "No, I just need a few minutes of her time. It's important." She made a quick call, speaking too quietly for me to hear the full conversation. "I caught only fragments, says she's your sister, and no appointment and insistent." "Miss Wilson will be available soon," she finally said, setting down the phone. "You can wait in conference room 3, down the hall, third door on the right." The conference room featured a glass wall facing the main office area, making me feel like a fish in an aquarium. Everyone who walked by could see me sitting alone at the massive table designed for 20. Through the glass panels of other rooms, I spotted Amanda in her corner office, laughing with a group of colleagues. She wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit with a silk blouse that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her hair was styled in a sleek bob that framed her face elegantly, so different from my own unruly curls, pulled back in a simple ponytail. 1 hour passed, then 2, then 3. I watched the large wall clock tick away, minutes I couldn't afford to lose. My interview at Hudson Media grew closer. Occasionally Amanda would glance toward the conference room, then return to her conversation or look down at her phone. She knew I was waiting but chose to make me wait. An assistant eventually entered carrying a water pitcher. "Miss Wilson apologizes for the delay. She's just wrapping up some important business." He set down the pitcher but provided no glasses. The small slight felt deliberate. At 9:15, just 45 minutes before my interview, the conference room door finally opened. Amanda entered, but not alone. 4 junior executives followed her, each carrying tablets and notebooks. This wasn't going to be a private conversation as I'd hoped. "Callie." What a surprise! Amanda's voice carried the excessive enthusiasm people use when they want others to notice their generosity. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Everyone, this is my baby sister. Isn't it sweet that she came to visit me at work?" The executives murmured polite greetings while I shifted uncomfortably. One young man in a navy blue suit looked bored. A woman with sharp features studied me with open curiosity. "Amanda, I just need a quick word in private," I said softly. "Nonsense. These are my colleagues. We're like family here." She sat at the head of the table, gesturing for the others to take seats. "What brings you to my world today? Architectural inspiration for your artwork." I swallowed my rising anger and embarrassment. "I need to borrow $100, just until next week. My car's almost out of gas and I have a really important job interview at 10. The silence that followed felt eternal. Amanda's expression froze, then morphed into something between amusement and disdain. $100, she repeated loudly, ensuring everyone heard. "You came to Atlantic National Bank headquarters to ask for $100. The young man in the navy suit smirked. The sharp-featured woman studied her manicure, clearly uncomfortable. "I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important," I said, my voice barely audible. "I can pay you back as soon as I get my first paycheck." Amanda leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "This is actually a perfect learning opportunity." She turned to her colleagues. "Financial literacy education is something we discuss in our community outreach programs, right?" Without waiting for a response, Amanda tapped her tablet and the large screen on the conference room wall illuminated with a banking dashboard. "Let me show you something, Callie. This is a typical savings account for someone your age in your income bracket." She pulled up graphs and charts displaying average savings rates and investment strategies. Most professionals your age should have at least 6 months of living expenses saved. That's approximately $15,000 for someone in your situation. The presentation continued, becoming more pointed with each slide. People who experience frequent financial emergencies typically show these spending patterns, she explained, displaying a pie chart with large sections labeled non-essential purchases and impulse buys. "The issue isn't income, it's financial management." Amanda continued, her voice. taking on the tone of a lecturer addressing a particularly slow student. People like you should learn to save instead of wasting money on luxury items and then expecting bailouts. The navy-suited executive snickered, typing something on his phone. Probably sharing this humiliating moment with others. The sharp-featured woman's discomfort had grown visible, but she remained silent. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "I've never asked you for money before," I said quietly. "I had unexpected medical bills and my clients canceled contracts because of the economic downturn. I'm trying to get back on my feet." "There's always an excuse, isn't there?" Amanda sighed dramatically. "This is exactly what enables the cycle of financial dependency. If I give you $100 today, what will you need next month? 200? 500? My hands trembled beneath the table. "Never mind, I'll figure something out." "That's probably best," Amanda agreed, her tone falsely supportive. "Sometimes the greatest gift is allowing someone to solve their own problems." She turned to her colleagues. "As we discuss in our financial empowerment seminars, sometimes you have to let people hit rock bottom before they're motivated to change their habits." As I stood to leave, Amanda called to her assistant. "Daniel, please escort my sister out. We need to follow security protocol for non-employees." The final indignity was walking through the office floor with Daniel slightly behind me, clearly functioning as a security escort rather than a guide. Employees glanced up from their desks, whispers following in my wake. I caught fragments Vice President Wilson's sister, and asking for money, and totally inappropriate. The elevator ride felt endless. When the doors finally opened to the lobby, Daniel gestured toward the exit. "The main entrance is that way," he said unnecessarily, before turning back toward the elevators without another word. I pushed through the revolving door into the morning air, humiliation burning through every inch of my body. My interview at Hudson Media was in 20 minutes across town, and I had no way to get there. But somehow, that seemed like the least of my problems now. I sat in my car in the underground parking garage, hands gripping the steering wheel, though the engine remained off. Tears blurred my vision, but I couldn't afford to let them fall and ruin what little makeup I'd applied for my interview. The digital clock on my dashboard showed 9:27. The Hudson Media opportunity was slipping away, along with any hope of financial recovery. A sharp knock on my window made me jump. A woman stood beside my car, her expression concerned rather than threatening. She wore the same navy blazer as other bank employees, but something about her seemed different from the polished automatons I'd encountered inside. Cautiously, I lowered my window halfway. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I saw what happened upstairs." "I'm fine," I lied automatically. "No, you're not." She handed me a paper cup. "It's coffee from the executive lounge. Probably better than you can get at most cafes in Boston." The unexpected kindness nearly broke my composure. "Thank you, but I really should go." "I'm Sophia," she said, ignoring my attempt to end the conversation. "I work in compliance. Mind if I sit down for a minute?" Before I could respond, she walked around to the passenger side and opened the door. The presumptuous action should have bothered me, but something in her manner suggested she wasn't a threat. "What Amanda did in there was completely unprofessional," Sophia said, once seated, her voice low, as though concerned about being overheard, even in the privacy of my car. "It wasn't the first time either." "You know my sister?" I asked, surprised. "Everyone knows your sister, but not in the way you might think." Sophia took a sip of her own coffee. "The respect she thinks she commands. It's mostly fear and obligation. The executives who follow her around are trying to protect their careers, not because they admire her leadership." I remained silent, unsure how to respond to this unexpected candor from a stranger. "I shouldn't tell you this," Sophia continued, checking her watch. "But there have been rumors about your sister for months. Security has noticed her arriving at odd hours, accessing accounts she has no business reviewing." "What are you saying?" I asked, a knot forming in my stomach. 3 weeks ago, I overheard her on the phone in the stairwell. She was talking to someone about covering markers, whatever that means. When she saw me, she hung up immediately and made a comment about reception being better in the stairwell. "Markers are gambling debts," I said, automatically remembering an article I'd read about casino terminology. Are you saying Amanda has gambling problems? Sophia's expression confirmed my suspicion. That's the rumor, and it would explain some irregularities we've noticed in certain accounts she oversees. Why are you telling me this? Because the federal auditors are coming next week, Sophia replied, her voice dropping even lower. And there's a $5.3 billion account belonging to Middle Eastern investors that shows unusual transfer patterns over the past 6 months, all authorized by your sister. The information felt too enormous to process. My perfect financially responsible sister, the family golden child, was potentially involved in banking irregularities tied to a gambling addiction. It seemed impossible, yet it explained subtle changes I'd noticed in Amanda's behavior at recent family gatherings, her increased irritability, the dark circles under her eyes concealed by expensive makeup, her constant checking of her phone. There's more, Sophia added, glancing at her watch again. Last month, Amanda had to explain a $2 million discrepancy to the board. She blamed it on a software glitch and brought in IT to verify her claim. The tech guy who fixed it was fired 2 days later for unrelated reasons. My mind raced back to a strange incident 3 months earlier. A collection notice had been mistakenly delivered to my apartment instead of Amanda's previous address. The envelope had been marked "Final Warning" from something called Desert Palace Resorts. I'd texted her about it, and she'd responded with unusual aggression, demanding I destroy it immediately without opening it. I'd complied, assuming it was junk mail. Why would Amanda risk everything, I wondered aloud. She has the perfect life. Perfect lives often hide the biggest problems, Sophia replied philosophically. But listen, I'm telling you this because what she did to you today wasn't right. And if there's fallout from the audit, your family might be blindsided. She slipped a business card into my cup holder. This is Greg Stevens, our Chief Compliance Officer. If you ever need to talk to someone about what's happening here, he's the right person. I don't know what to do with this information, I admitted. For now, don't you have a job interview to get to? Sophia reached into her pocket and pulled out a $100 bill. Consider this a loan from someone who's been where you are. Pay me back when you can or pay it forward. Before I could respond, she opened the car door. And Callie, your sister isn't the financial genius she pretends to be. Remember that next time she tries to humiliate you. After Sophia left, I sat in stunned silence for several minutes. The revelation about Amanda had shifted something fundamental in my understanding of our relationship. The perfect sister I'd envied for decades might be a fraud, her success potentially built on deception and heading for collapse. I started the car, the gas gauge warning light still illuminated. With Sophia's $100, I could make it to my interview and have enough left for a few days of essential expenses. But instead of immediate relief, I felt a strange new emotion taking hold, something between determination and righteous anger. That evening, after a surprisingly successful interview at Hudson Media, despite my emotional turmoil, I began researching banking regulations and whistleblower protections. Articles about similar banking scandals provided context for what Sophia had revealed. One story particularly caught my attention: a mid-level employee at a San Francisco bank who had exposed executive fraud and received not only legal protection, but a percentage of the recovered funds as a reward. A Google search of Amanda's name initially showed only professional accomplishments and charity event photographs, but adding keywords like gambling and casino led me to an online forum where users with anonymous profiles discussed high-stakes poker games in Boston. A user named A.Winvestor had posted regularly until 3 months ago, often discussing aggressive betting strategies and significant losses. The writing style was unmistakably Amanda's, with the same condescending tone she used when explaining financial concepts to family members. I remembered the strange texts from my mother last month. Amanda seemed very distracted at lunch today. She kept checking her phone and left early for what she said was an important meeting. When I called her office later, her assistant said she had taken a personal day. The more I discovered, the clearer the picture became. My financially perfect sister, the one who had lectured me for years about responsibility and planning, was likely in serious trouble. And soon that trouble would become public, affecting not just her reputation, but potentially our entire family. I faced a moral dilemma. Should I warn Amanda about what I'd learned, giving her time to cover her tracks, or seek help? Or should I speak to the compliance officer, potentially protecting the bank's clients, but destroying my sister's career and possibly sending her to prison? The night passed without sleep as I weighed different options. By dawn, an unexpected clarity had emerged. This wasn't about revenge for years of condescension or even today's public humiliation. This was about something more fundamental: truth and consequences, responsibility and accountability, the very values Amanda had preached while apparently failing to live by them herself. As morning light filtered through my apartment windows, I made my decision. The next morning I prepared methodically. I dressed in my interview outfit again, this time with a different blouse that had no stains. From a drawer rarely opened, I retrieved a digital voice recorder from my journalism elective days in college. I tested it twice, confirming it still worked, then slipped it into my pocket. I made copies of the forum posts I'd found, printed the strangely worded texts from my mother about Amanda's behavior, and found the delivery confirmation for that casino collection notice that had mistakenly come to my Wada address. None of these constituted proof of wrongdoing, but together they formed a pattern that might interest someone like Greg Stevens, the compliance officer whose card sat on my kitchen table. The decision to return to Atlantic National Bank wasn't driven by revenge, though I can't deny a certain satisfaction at the thought of Amanda facing consequences. It was about justice, about the principle that rules should apply equally to everyone, regardless of their title or family status. This time I didn't enter through the imposing main entrance. Instead, I used the employee entrance Sophia had pointed out when leaving yesterday. The door required a key card, but she had mentioned that during shift changes, people often held the door for anyone who looked like they belonged. True to her word, a group of employees arriving for the morning shift barely glanced at me as I joined their cluster, nodding professionally, as if I did this every day. My timing was deliberate. Sophia had mentioned that Amanda would be presenting to the Middle Eastern investors today at 9:30, a meeting that would keep her occupied for at least an hour. That gave me a narrow window to find what I needed. Walking confidently through the executive floor was surprisingly easy. I'd observed enough yesterday to mimic the purposeful stride of someone with legitimate business. When passing Amanda's assistant's desk, I noted with relief that it was temporarily unoccupied, a jacket draped over the chair, suggesting a quick bathroom break. Amanda's office door was closed, but unlocked. I slipped inside, heart pounding so loudly I was certain someone would hear it. The spacious corner office featured floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Boston skyline. Her desk was immaculate, with files arranged in perfect alignment and a computer monitor currently displaying a screensaver of Atlantic National Bank's logo. On the credenza behind her desk, I spotted a framed family photo from last Christmas. Our parents stood in the center, Amanda and I flanking them. She had her arm around my shoulder in a rare display of sisterly affection. The gesture had felt forced at the time, performed for the photographer's benefit. Now it seemed even more artificial. Focus, Callie. I reminded myself of my purpose. Time was limited. Amanda's security badge lay carelessly on her desk, apparently removed for her formal presentation. This was the key I needed. According to what Sophia had let slip, executive badges provided access to the bank's transfer systems, allowing high-level management to authorize movements of funds between accounts. I picked up the badge, hesitating, only briefly before moving to Amanda's computer. A swipe of the badge unlocked the screen, bypassing the password requirement. The system opened to reveal dozens of applications and folders, most with names that meant nothing to me. Navigating through the unfamiliar interface, I searched for anything related to transfers or the Middle Eastern investors Sophia had mentioned. After several tense minutes, I located a program labeled Global Trans that seemed promising. The application opened to display a sophisticated dashboard with multiple account numbers. One account in particular stood out, labeled AMIC Investment Holdings, with a balance that made me blink twice to ensure I wasn't seeing things $5.3 billion. This had to be the account Sophia mentioned. With trembling fingers, I selected it, opening a transfer menu. The system prompted for an amount and destination. In the amount field, I carefully typed $5,300,000,000 and selected Prepare for Authorization rather than Complete Transfer. According to the on-screen information, this would cue the transaction for final approval without actually moving the funds. My intention wasn't to steal or even temporarily transfer the money. I simply needed evidence of Amanda's activities, and I suspected that large transfer preparations would be logged and monitored by the bank's security systems. The moment I clicked, "Prepare," everything changed. An alarm blared throughout the building so loud it felt physical. Red lights began flashing in the hallway outside the office. On Amanda's computer, a security alert window popped up: "Unauthorized transaction, attempt detected, system lockdown initiated." I hadn't anticipated such an immediate and dramatic response. Through the office windows, I saw employees looking confused, some standing from their desks. Security personnel appeared moving with urgent purpose rather than their usual measured pace. The office door flew open. Amanda stood there, face drained of color, eyes wild with panic. Behind her, I glimpsed her presentation group and several security officers converging on the office. "Callie, what the hell are you doing?" Amanda's voice cracked with strain as she took in the scene, me at her computer, her security badge in my hand. The transfer screen still displayed. "Learning about financial management?" I replied calmly, swiveling her chair to face her directly. "Isn't that what you wanted for me?" The security system continued its automated protocol. Metal shutters began descending over the main exit doors, the lockdown procedure designed to contain potential financial crimes in progress. As Amanda's colleagues and bank security crowded the doorway, I met my sister's terrified gaze and whispered words only she could hear: "Who's pathetic now?" Chaos erupted in the executive floor of Atlantic National Bank. The alarm system continued its piercing wail as security personnel established a perimeter around Amanda's office. Employees gathered in clusters, whispering urgently while stealing glances toward the commotion. I remained seated in Amanda's chair, hands visible on the desk, maintaining a composure that contrasted sharply with my racing heart. Amanda's attempt to control the situation became increasingly desperate. "This is a misunderstanding," she announced to the growing crowd of onlookers. "My sister was just visiting and accidentally accessed a restricted system. A family prank gone wrong. There's no need for alarm." Her nervous laugh found no echo among her colleagues. The sharp-featured woman from yesterday's meeting studied Amanda with new suspicion. "Miss Wilson, we need to secure the area immediately," said a security officer, with a crew cut and a nameplate identifying him as head of security. "All unauthorized personnel must be contained and access to financial systems frozen until we determine the extent of the breach." "This is ridiculous, James." "It's my sister," Amanda hissed. "She knows nothing about banking systems. She's a graphic designer, for God's sake." "Protocol is clear, Miss Wilson. The $5.3 billion AMIC account has been flagged for transfer. That triggers our highest security response, including notification to federal authorities." At the mention of federal authorities, Amanda's professionally maintained facade cracked further. "Federal? No, absolutely not. This is an internal matter. I can handle this personally." Two men in suits who hadn't been part of the original response team now appeared displaying badges. "FBI Financial Crimes Unit," the taller one announced. "We were automatically notified of a potential unauthorized transfer attempt involving international funds. Everyone needs to stay where they are." I hadn't expected law enforcement to respond so quickly. The bank's security system must have been directly linked to federal monitoring, given the size and international nature of the account I'd accessed. "I can explain everything," I said calmly as the agents approached. "I never intended to complete any transfer. I was only trying to expose suspicious activity related to this account." "Please come with us, miss." The agent left the question hanging. "Wilson. Callie Wilson. I'm Amanda Wilson's sister." They separated us, immediately taking Amanda to a conference room while I was escorted to a smaller office. For the next 3 hours, I explained everything to a patient agent named Rodriguez. I shared what Sophia had told me, showed the forum posts from Winvestor, and described the pattern of behavior I'd observed in Amanda. I didn't touch the money, I emphasized. I only wanted to trigger the system to look more closely at my sister's activities. The transfer was never meant to be completed. That's still unauthorized access to a banking system, Agent Rodriguez noted, though his tone lacked accusation. But your cooperation is helpful. We've actually had this bank under observation for several months. There have been irregular transfer patterns that raised flags in our monitoring systems. In the adjacent room, through the partially open blinds, I could see Amanda on her phone, gesturing frantically. From her expression, the conversation wasn't going well. She's trying to call our parents, I explained to Rodriguez. They've always bailed her out of trouble. A forensic team had taken control of Amanda's computer, methodically examining files and access logs. One technician approached Agent Rodriguez, speaking too quietly for me to hear. Rodriguez nodded grimly, then turned back to me. We found something interesting, he said. Deleted emails recovered from the system backup show correspondence between your sister and several offshore entities. There are references to covering personal debts using temporary transfers from client accounts with the funds returned before monthly audits. That matches what Sophia told me about the timing. I said, a cold feeling settling in my stomach, despite my suspicions being confirmed. Part of me had hoped to be wrong about Amanda. The investigation expanded rapidly. Security footage showed Amanda entering the bank at 3 a.m. on multiple occasions over the past year, accessing systems from terminals other than her own. Records revealed transfers to accounts linked to known online gambling operations disguised as investment consultancy fees. Amanda's defense crumbled as evidence mounted. During a confrontation in the main conference room, where bank executives had gathered with the FBI agents, she finally broke. It started small, she admitted, tears streaking her expensive makeup. Just a few thousand here and there when I was short after a bad weekend. I always paid it back before anyone would notice. Until you couldn't keep up anymore. The bank's CEO, a silver-haired man named Harrington, said coldly. How much are we talking about, Amanda? 1.7 million, she whispered, avoiding everyone's gaze. The room fell silent. Even the FBI agent seemed shocked by the amount. To gambling debts, Harrington pressed. Amanda nodded miserably. I thought I could win it back. Just one big score to fix everything. That's how it always works. That's how it never works, he corrected. You've potentially exposed this institution to criminal liability, breached every ethical standard we uphold, and violated the trust of clients who control billions in assets. I felt no satisfaction watching Amanda's professional destruction. Despite everything, she was still my sister, and seeing her reduced to sobbing in a conference room surrounded by federal agents and disgusted colleagues was difficult. That evening, our parents arrived at their suburban home to find both daughters waiting. Amanda had been released pending formal charges, her passport confiscated, her career effectively over. I had been cleared of wrongdoing, my actions classified as whistleblowing rather than criminal activity. Would someone please explain what's happening? Our father demanded, his face ashen as he looked between us. Amanda broke down completely, then confessing everything through heaving sobs. The gambling that had started in college as poker games with friends, the thrill of high-stakes tables in Connecticut casinos, the online betting that made it easy to place wagers at any hour, the mounting debts that eventually led to desperate measures. $1.7 million, our mother repeated, clearly struggling to comprehend the figure. Amanda, how could you? I kept thinking I could fix it, Amanda said, sounding smaller and younger than I'd ever heard her. One good run at the tables, one lucky streak. While you were lecturing me about saving and financial responsibility, I added, unable to keep the bitter edge from my voice. I know, she whispered. I know how hypocritical it was. But the persona I created, the successful, responsible daughter, it became a prison. I couldn't admit I was failing, not to anyone. Especially not to the family who saw me as the golden child. In that moment, I glimpsed something I'd never seen in my perfect sister before: profound vulnerability. Behind the designer clothes and executive title had been someone drowning, too proud or too frightened to reach for help. Later that night, after our shell-shocked parents had gone to bed, Amanda and I sat alone in the kitchen of our childhood home. Why did you do it? She asked quietly. Why expose me, instead of warning me privately? Would you have listened? I countered. Or would you have lectured me about minding my own business and sticking to my little drawings? She flinched at having her own condescending words thrown back at her. You're right, she admitted after a long pause. I wouldn't have listened. I was too far gone, too convinced of my own narrative. You know what the strangest part is? I said, turning my coffee mug slowly between my palms. For years I envied you, your confidence, your success, the ease with which you moved through the world. And I envied you, Amanda replied, the admission clearly difficult. Your freedom, your authenticity. You never pretended to be something you weren't. I've been playing a role for so long I don't know who I am without it. The conversation continued until dawn, painful but necessary, the first honest exchange between sisters in decades. 3 months later, I walked into my new office at Hudson Media, still marveling at how dramatically life can change in a short time. My modest workspace featured northern exposure, perfect for evaluating color palettes on my monitor. The salary, though substantial by my previous standards, represented less than what Amanda used to spend annually on designer handbags alone, yet I felt richer than I ever had before. The aftermath of the Atlantic National Bank incident had unfolded in ways none of us could have predicted. Amanda entered a rehabilitation program for gambling addiction, her admission to the court, and participation in treatment resulting in reduced charges. The bank, eager to avoid publicity about internal security failures, reached a quiet settlement with me that included whistleblower compensation significant enough to clear my medical debts and establish a genuine emergency fund. I chose to use part of that settlement to help pay for Amanda's treatment, a decision that surprised both her and our parents. After everything she put you through, my mother had asked in disbelief. It's not about keeping score anymore, I explained. It's about breaking unhealthy patterns for all of us. Weekly family therapy sessions became our new ritual, replacing the performance art of family gatherings where achievements were tallied and compared. For the first time, our parents confronted their role in creating the dynamics that had shaped both daughters so differently. We didn't realize we were putting so much pressure on Amanda to succeed, my father admitted during one particularly emotional session. Or that we were dismissing your creative talents, Callie. We thought we were just being practical, but we were really projecting our own fears and biases. My mother reached for my hand across the therapist's office. Your art was never just a hobby or a phase. We were wrong to treat it that way. We were wrong about so many things. As weeks turned to months, I discovered a newfound confidence that came not from external validation, but from living authentically. The Hudson Media position challenged me creatively and professionally, pushing my skills in new directions without the constant fear of financial catastrophe looming overhead. Amanda's journey proved more difficult. Her name, once mentioned with reverence in financial circles, now carried the taint of scandal. Former colleagues crossed the street to avoid encounters. Professional connections evaporated overnight. The identity she had constructed so carefully lay in ruins around her. Yet from those ruins, something unexpected emerged: humility, self-awareness, and gradually, a kind of peace I'd never associated with my driven sister. She accepted a position at a small credit union, starting in an entry-level role with careful oversight and no access to transfer systems. The work was beneath her qualifications, but perfectly suited to her rehabilitation. It's strange, she told me during a small dinner, celebrating her 90 days of recovery. I make a fifth of my old salary, live in an apartment the size of my former closet, and yet I sleep better than I have in years. Our parents, watching their daughters interact with genuine warmth rather than competitive tension, seemed to physically age backward. The stress lines that had marked my father's forehead for decades softened. My mother laughed more easily, no longer moderating family interactions with nervous energy. The greatest revelation came not in the dramatic moments of exposure or confession, but in the quiet realization that success measured by bank accounts and professional titles had nearly destroyed my sister. Meanwhile, my supposedly unstable creative career had given me the resilience and adaptability to weather financial storms without losing my core identity. I want to start a financial literacy program, I told Amanda one afternoon as we walked along the Charles River. Not the kind that shames people for buying coffee or assumes everyone has the same priorities. Real financial education that acknowledges different paths and values. For artists and creative types, she asked. Initially, yes. People whose incomes fluctuate, who might value freedom and fulfillment over security and status. People the traditional financial industry tends to dismiss or misunderstand. Amanda nodded thoughtfully. I could help with that. Not as the expert I once pretended to be, but as someone who learned the hard way what happens when you build your life on appearances rather than reality. The unexpected friendship developing between us felt foreign but increasingly natural. We were learning to appreciate each other's strengths without competing to acknowledge vulnerabilities without weaponizing them. The facade of perfection Amanda had maintained for decades had concealed her deepest struggles. My apparent financial instability had masked a stronger foundation of self-knowledge and authentic connections. As months passed, I found freedom in living truthfully rather than competitively. Amanda found peace in acceptance rather than artificial performance. Our parents discovered that letting go of rigid expectations allowed for deeper relationships with both daughters. What my sister failed to understand during all those years of financial lectures was that true wealth isn't counted in dollars, but in self-respect, in genuine connections, in the courage to face reality instead of hiding behind prestige and possessions. The moment I stood up for myself in her office wasn't just about exposing her deception, it was about claiming my own value in a family dynamic that had dismissed it for too long. Today, when people ask how my relationship with my sister changed so dramatically, I tell them it began with a $100 loan that never happened and a $5.3 billion transfer that never completed. But it really started the moment I decided that my worth wasn't determined by my bank balance or someone else's approval. If there's one thing I hope you take from my story, it's this: standing up for yourself is the ultimate form of self-respect. Sometimes the people who criticize you most harshly are fighting battles you know nothing about. And true success isn't about accumulating wealth or status. It's about building a life that reflects your authentic self, even when others can't see its value. Have you ever had a moment when standing up for yourself changed everything? Or discovered that someone who seemed perfect was struggling beneath the surface? Share your experience in the comments below. And if my story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more perspectives that might change how you see the world around you. Remember, your worth isn't measured by your bank account, but by the courage to live authentically even when others underestimate you. Thank you for listening, and I hope our paths cross again soon.